Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers. We're here every week, meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. And we welcome a woman in today who's quite esteemed in her profession.
Well, she is indeed, and she happens to be able to attain that status, notwithstanding the fact that she's my partner. Timila Rother is our guest today, head of a firm for many years where I have chosen to practice, and is just an outstanding emissary in the law on all fronts. I have entitled the show A Trail-Blazing Lawyer, and she indeed is that.
We will meet her today on The Verdict. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy. On the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
As we talked about in the open, I'm particularly pleased to have a good friend of many years, 30 plus years, joining us today. Her name is Timila Rother. She is a lawyer with Crowe and Dunlevy. Let me give you a little bit of her background. She did her undergraduate work at the University of Oklahoma, did her law work at the University of Oklahoma, and was a 1990 graduate from that institution. She has been at the same firm for 30 plus years and is a trial lawyer. She always wanted to do trial work, and we assured her that we could give her a steady supply, and I think we might have to redefine steady as overwhelming supply of work to do, and she has done it all well. She was president of Crowe and Dunlevy for 5 years, and she now is head of our litigation department. She chairs that with supervisor responsibility over 70 lawyers or so. That's a changing number, but that's an approximate number. She has twice been named a Achieving Woman Under 50, making a difference. I don't know very many people that have made that list twice, but she has won many other awards. I'm certainly pleased to have her sitting across from me today. Timila, welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Mick. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've watched this program a number of times. I have to say, when you're watching it on television, the set looks large, but it's nice and cozy, and I'm happy to be here talking to you guys, especially about something I love to talk about, which is the practice of law in Crowe and Dunlevy.
Well, let's start talking about you and your Southwest Oklahoma roots. Tell us about growing up in Sterling.
Yes, I did. I grew up in Sterling, Oklahoma, which is a small town, for those of you who do not know, in Comanche County. It's about 23 miles northeast of Lawton. Started there in kindergarten, went all the way through high school. 15 of the students I started kindergarten with, I graduated high school with, and there were 24 of us total. So small community, but a good school, good teachers.
Public education.
Yes.
So did you find you were prepared when you got to the University of Oklahoma for your undergraduate degree? Did you look back and say, they did a good job preparing me for this next role, or did you find things that were lacking from your public education?
You know, I am a big supporter of public education, and I did feel prepared. We had teachers that had been, I think small town people sometimes like to stay in small towns, and our teachers had been there for years and years, and sometimes when you've been someplace for years and years, which we'll talk about, you kind of get complacent and you don't have as much energy for what you're doing. But that wasn't true with my folks. We had gifted and talented programs and other programs where kids really had choices to excel if that's what they wanted to do. Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit about your position being with the same firm in 2024 that you started out with in 1990. That is rather, in some circles, pretty rare to stay at the same place for that many years. How does that come about?
Well, Kent, as somebody else who's been at the same firm.
Well, I just couldn't get a job anywhere else.
That's not true. That is not true. So, I'm sure the audience knows Kent was at this same firm and is with this same firm for way more than the 30 years I've been there. And I think, Kent, that you and I would agree that one of the reasons really is that once you find a place where you feel like you can work with others to do what you really like doing, the practice of law with people who are smart and dedicated, who are focused on client service first, the collegiality, the fact that somebody always has your back. So the practice of law is extraordinarily hard and extraordinarily busy. And when you're at a firm like Crowe and Dunlevy, where Kent and I had the good fortune to spend our careers, you've always got somebody to back you up. And it's somebody that is every bit as talented or more so than you. So I've just never felt the need to go anywhere else. And I know this industry is changing. It's becoming a bit more of a business. And so that creates some mobility. I think a lot of people get into the practice of law and figure out this is really hard. It's time consuming. We say this, lawyers say this, when you sell your time by the hour, which most of us do, you end up working a lot of hours. And so I think you see a lot of mobility because people get into the practice of law and they think, okay, this isn't what I expected. I'm going to try someplace else to see if that's what I expected. But oftentimes those people move again. So I think some of the mobility is just caused by people maybe deciding that the practice of law isn't quite what they thought it was going to be.
Well, you have been engaged in trial work since day one, I believe. How did you come to think that's what area of practice law you wanted to occupy?
So it's funny, I was a political science major undergrad, and I got to my junior year of college, and I was thinking, what am I going to do next? There were no lawyers in my family, and I had a friend just sort of out of the blue say, hey, Timila, all your life I've known you growing up, you really just kind of like to argue with people. So maybe you should think about law school. And so really that's kind of the genesis
of this. So you weren't, when you enrolled at OU, you weren't on a path to the law school necessarily?
Nope. I was interested in government and history. And I had a couple of legal classes undergrad, but when my friend suggested law school, totally fortuitously, I thought, yeah, so I applied, happy to get accepted, and it was perfect. I really do just like to debate issues. So growing up, if I had a friend take a position, even if I agreed with that position, I would take the opposite position just so we could argue about it. So I think that's a natural litigator.
When you were in law school, what area of practice did you find yourself naturally attracted to?
I loved civil procedure, federal courts, We had a trial practice class, which I enjoyed. Contracts, anything where you could kind of debate both sides of the issue and apply the law to come to a conclusion, which I really think is, if you love doing that, then I think you will stick and enjoy in the practice of law.
Well, let me ask you a question about yourself and your perception of others. How do women in general face challenges in litigation, in a litigation practice that men may not face?
So I kind of want to answer that in two parts. You all can tell, and I'm not on this program to promote Crowe and Dunlevy, but it's so much a part of the fabric of who I am that I want to answer this in two ways. At Crowe and Dunlevy, it never made a difference. So, and I've said this to women, men, anybody who've asked me about my career. At Crowe and Dunlevy, you are a lawyer at Crowe and Dunlevy. You're not a woman lawyer or a male lawyer. You're just a lawyer at Crowe and Dunlevy. And I had great women, Brooke Murphy, Judy Morse, Cinda Ottaway, that came in front of me. And I never once at the firm felt like there was any difference in my perception, my work assignments, or anything because of being a female. And for the most part, unlike a lot of my colleagues, I didn't experience that too much in the courtroom or in meetings, but you kind of sense it, and sometimes you'll have a client maybe that thinks, if I need the most aggressive person for my case, maybe I need a man, and a gray-haired man, to do that as opposed to a woman. And you know what? Sometimes I'm sympathetic with that view of clients. If they think there's a jury of men that is going to react better to a man, I don't begrudge them that because this case is important to them. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel slighted by those kinds of decisions where other people might. I'll tell you just, there's probably only 2 times where somebody really said something to me that I thought, they would, that's because I'm a woman. And one of them was just in a very contentious meeting, all men, me, and I don't notice that most of the time. It's true a lot, but I don't notice it. And I said something on behalf of my client because I was irritated, and I was being an advocate, and it was a pretty aggressive statement. And a gentleman in the room that was not a lawyer then looked at me and said, "Who are you, and are you even a lawyer anyway?" And I thought, okay, maybe that might be a chauvinistic attitude there. But other than, I've been fortunate, I think. And maybe it's just, again, the training I received at Crowe and Dunlevy. I didn't go out there expecting to be treated differently. I went out there expecting to be treated the same.
Timila Rother is our guest today. She is an attorney at Crowe and Dunlevy. We're going to learn more about her and her practice in law when we get back.
At Whitten Burridge, we're litigators. That's all we do. All of our clients, some sort of wrong has occurred to them. We try to right that wrong. Corporate America, they have all the power. It's sort of like going against an army. I like helping the underdog. That's what gets me up out of bed every day.
Our success rate is phenomenal, but that's not all they get. We care about people.
I'm very proud of what we've been able to do for our clients, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to do in the future. There's still a lot of wrongs that need to be righted.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams ranked number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
The Vet Hero office at the University of Central Oklahoma, it is a one-stop shop for veterans when they're trying to get their education.
I call it my encore job. I get to take care of veterans. We help them transition. I was that guy that transitioned after 24 years, and in the end, GI Bill is a benefit that those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine earned. It was the thing that made us the greatest country in the world coming out of World War II, and it will continue to do the same thing for this future generation of service members.
We're back on The Verdict. Timila Rother is our guest, and I would imagine you've been had the opportunity to speak to a lot of young women who might be considering a career in law. What do you tell them?
I have, and I've had such a good experience that I come to those questions with a very positive attitude about it. But I do know colleagues who have not had as good of experience, and we were kind of chatting about the attorneys that were at the firm, even female attorneys that were at the firm 10 and 15 years before me, and the sort of little lady comments and things like that they had. So when I'm talking to current female law students, I usually tell them two things. Number one, it is hard, right? And so make sure you love it and this is what you want to do. And then second, this sounds just really simple, but I say just stick with it. If you get in and you feel overwhelmed, whether it's because you're a female or anything else, look for mentors, reach out, to other people who have done this. Most women who have been in this profession are more than happy to talk to those coming behind them. And I don't know if we were going to get into this a little later, but, for women, because of the traditional roles of women in the home, the hardest thing, I think, for young women, and I spend a lot of time talking to young women and men lawyers about this, raising a family and practicing in a profession where you usually work a lot of hours, especially if you're in litigation. The court controls your schedule more than you do. You have deadlines that you cannot change. And so raising a child or children while you're trying to do those things is hard. And it's doubly hard for women because you have your work life and then you have home life. And because of traditional notions at home, you're still the organizer, right? You're the one making the doctor's appointments. You're the one going on the field trips. Men are much better now than they used to be, but kind of traditionally. So then you have two full-time jobs, right? You're the person organizing things at home, and then you have a full-time job at work. And so I just try to adjust their expectations on, what you're going to be facing. Don't feel inferior if you have to ask for a part-time arrangement to get through that. I think some women think that's a sign of weakness, and that makes them look inferior to their male counterparts. But if that works for you, find a place where you can
be a little
do
more
that.
selfish in what you ask for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me ask you about a different topic, although it's related. Civility. Civility amongst professionals, amongst lawyers, and to the other lawyers and to the court, from 1990 to today. Has it changed? Is it better? Is it worse? Why?
It is probably worse, but it's also situational. So I think we've all sort of observed over the last 10 or 15 years, and I don't want to be one of those old people blaming social media, but there's just so much more information out there and so much more ways that people can be agitated or feel inadequate or whatever. I think that creeps into all aspects of our life, including our profession. And so as a litigator, you're often faced with other lawyers who think because you're a litigator, that means you always have to fight, right? And you always have to be aggressive. And that means if somebody needs an extension of time or something, you just have to object on principle because otherwise you're not being an advocate. And so I've seen an increase of that. I have seen an increase in what I think is strategic motions that are uncivil, just to increase the expense of litigation so that perhaps a client will be more likely to settle because they don't want to have to face that ongoing litigiousness. So I have seen that, Kent, on a strategic basis and in some individual cases. Having said that, there are some neighboring states where the contentiousness is at a whole different level. And that's where I kind of think, our Oklahoma hospitality, right? It's ingrained in most of us as Oklahomans to be friendly, to be cooperative, to appreciate your neighbor. And I do think that comes across in Oklahoma more than it comes across in other states.
What implication do you draw from a couple of statistics that I'll give to you that I can warrant to you are correct? Of course, for some time, there have been more women graduating from law school than men. I don't know what the percentage is, but it would be above 50%, of course, and significantly. Moreover, there are more women starting out in the practice of law as associates in law firms than men. It kind of makes sense that there would be. But how do you reconcile that? Why do you suppose that is true?
That, I guess the question is now.
That you're taking over the profession.
Well, it's been our secret mission since at least 1990 when I started the practice of law. So if we're now carrying that out, it's all those women I've been talking to,
it's
right?
all
Those
part
law
of the
school
plan.
students
That's right. Good job.
that I've been talking to, yeah. And it's funny, I have watched those numbers. I do think women are very drawn to the practice of law. For lots of the reasons I described, that it interests me, and men too, but I feel like they think the doors are more open now than they were historically. I do think women are getting married later and having children later, and so I think that has changed the trajectory of their career path. And I think that's great, because I think if you can get into the practice of law and do it for a few years before you transition to that other phase of your life, then you're more likely to stick with it. And so we have always at the firm hired talent, right? Man, woman, doesn't matter who's talented and who wants to work. And we have historically had I think, higher number of women hires than men. One other thing that I think is a possibility, but I haven't studied this, is I often see, I don't think it's uncommon for men to graduate from law school and then not practice law. They might go into a complementary business or something. True of women too, but it just seems like a lot of my male colleagues have gone into real estate or into a private business or something, whereas women, I think, really get into the practice of law and are thriving.
Well, we got about 1 minute left. Let's go over some talking points to young women who might be considering a career in law. What do you want them to know if they're thinking about it?
Yeah. Before you expend the time and money on law school, talk to somebody that's a practicing lawyer, man and woman, and really figure out, is this something that you want to do? Because I think we really do lose most people because the practice of law is not what they thought. And there are other things you can do besides go into private practice. So if you go to law school, think about, what do I want to do with this degree? And then once you're in law school, be honest with yourself, right? Are you enjoying it? If you aren't, you don't have to finish, or finish and then do something else. And then when you get in it, look for mentors, look for people. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and just enjoy it. The intellectual process of the practice of law is a lot of fun.
Timila Rother is our guest. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you both for having me.
You bet.
Yeah.
Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
This is the epidemic of my generation. This is my HIV. This is my Black Plague.
In the midst of one of our state's largest crises,
Oklahomans are dying from this preventable and treatable disease on a daily basis.
we believe there's hope.
That little pill will cause destruction through your whole life.
Watch the entire award-winning 9-part docuseries Killing Pain, made available by Fighting Addiction Through Education at killingpain.com.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
We're back to wrap up the show with Timila Rother of Crowe and Dunlevy.
Yeah, she's a great partner, a great lawyer, and I'm sure pleased she'd come talk to us.
Yeah, she had a lot of really good advice for people who might be entering the profession as well as people who might be dealing with the profession. We have a couple of websites to draw your attention to. First one is where you can find more information about Timila at crowedunlevy.com. That's crowedunlevy.com. And then we have a website where you can log on and tell us about a guest you'd like to see or a topic you'd like to see us discussed. Do that, and we'll see you next week right here on The Verdict.